Hello, this is Alan G. Davison, and I am the author of The Blessed, and I'm going to continue to talk about my thoughts on my different characters, and just basically continue on what I originally did in the first part and second part of the initial episode. Now, in terms of characters, I think it'd be best to start off with the original characters that were created. The original characters that were introduced and created in the same exact day was Lucius, Darius, Sam, Hope, Alicia, Daean, Adam, Mabush, and Elenia. I think I might have repeated myself. And there was another character, but she wasn't scheduled to actually show up until the second book. I believe the original idea was call her Harley, or something along those lines. But as of right now, during the course of the second book, her name is Sheena. I'm debating on whether or not to change that name, so keep an ear out. That might actually be false information right there. Not false advertising, mind you. Anyway, I guess it'd be a good idea to start off with Daean. Now, I really didn't want any of me or my friends to actually be based off of the main character. We all had a bit of a part to play in his creation. Now, he was in, I really don't know what the main inspiration behind him was, but there were some contributing factors to why he thinks the way he is and why he is the way he is. Mainly because, like I said before, if I said it before, I'll say it again, is that I really didn't want to, but I ended up putting a lot of the way I sort of think into the character. But that's just sort of author, liberation. Many of the characters that are based off of friends are more my interpretations of those friends than who they actually are, because you never know how people act when they're not around. Bear in mind that's usually how it works most of the time, but that's how it works. Anyway, after we created the different characters, I sort of wanted someone I can have things explained to. Now, this is actually something I've seen done in quite a few different ways, and from video games to comic books, is creating a character in a new world that nobody really understands very well, so the audience and the actual character can have everything explained. So, that was kind of the motif behind it. I really didn't really think a whole lot when I actually turned him into the son of a farmer, which is relatively cliched in the grand scheme of things, considering different heroes who started off in a similar, just noting a couple would be Luke Skywalker from the Star Wars franchise, and Aragon from, the Inheritance saga. I didn't do this intentionally, but I really didn't have a whole lot of, thoughts in the whole thing. I'm not an individual who really believes that a beginning of a character is really all that important to who they are, which is probably because of my own upbringing, but I'm not here to talk about me. So, while it is relatively cliched of me, I didn't really want a whole lot of cliches involved in him. More often than not, if a character doesn't understand a situation, they have a habit of going through embarrassing moments where they do silly things or things that kind of go against what normal individuals. I didn't really want a character like that, so to speak. So I try to stick to the Boy Scouts. I really didn't want him to be an individual that would be dark or brooding or gritty or anything like that. I've just sort of not really cared too much for those characters, being raised on the old Superman cartoons from, I believe, the 60s, which, by the way, I grew up on. I really did enjoy those, and almost every single time that I ever came up with an idea, I always wanted the hero to take the high route, mainly because that's what I would hope heroes would do. And main characters. Going behind that, I took a lot of inspiration from J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, but not in the normal sense of inspiration. I really did enjoy her book series, but I felt Harry was a relatively flat character. I tried to keep Daean interesting in the sense that, while he was still relatable, he was different. Because, well, let's face it, nobody's ever a blank slate. And I really did enjoy messing with him. I probably took a little bit of myself, but it wouldn't surprise me if you see other, protagonists mixed into there as well. It wouldn't surprise me if some people might actually see a little bit of Peter Parker, since I am actually a pretty big Spider-Man fan. Sadly, I don't keep up on comic books very much, but, I do what I can when I can. Anyway, his blessing itself, the ability to control electricity, it sort of just popped into my head, to be honest. I really didn't think too much of it. I might have been a little influenced by Static Shock, or maybe, what was the other one that was, I think it was also, Infamous? Yes, Infamous. I would mind saying that they were probably in the background of my mind, since they were relatively good, and I really enjoyed both the game and the TV show. But to be honest, though, when I actually started noticing the similarities, I did everything in my power to create a differentiate in how he uses his powers and abilities. I really didn't want electricity to just be another projectile of which he can throw at his enemies. I really wanted something more organic. If one person has the ability to control electricity and, in retrospect, lightning as well, then what else could an individual do was more of my thought process. And I tried to make it a habit to come up with new ways to use his power without making him too powerful. As much as I do enjoy Superman, I have to admit it's a little bit difficult to write, think of story ideas for an individual who's capable of moving planets, so to speak. Though, between you and me, I wouldn't mind ever actually writing a comic book, around Superman. So, hey, DC, if you're interested, I would love to be put onto the next project. Okay, now that my obligatory shout-out is taken care of. I did base him around a moral good standpoint. But I wanted his thought process to be a little bit more interesting than that. I really wanted to make people think when I came up with this book. I really wanted to make a story that you would have to read through again after you got to the final book in order to really get all of the little bits and pieces. Daean in particular, I didn't really want him to become revenge obsessed. I really don't like those types of characters that start their adventures off with revenge on the brain. I really wanted to make it seem as though he was taking into consideration what his father would want. And as an individual who likes to keep the family happy, I, too, myself, would probably go through a similar thought process. But at the same time, I wanted to prove that, is he doing this out of revenge thought, or is he doing it because it's the right thing to do? And I honestly think that's probably the type of struggle that most individuals would go through if they found themselves in a similar situation. Is this revenge? Is this doing it for the right thing? Should I avoid? I really wanted this character to really think about what's going on around him. Because that always kind of bothered me about some protagonists, is that they always seem to take the rebel or the automatic good standpoint and say, yes, this is good, we're going to go with that. When, in my personal opinion, no one really does anything because they think it's harmful or cruel. I really believe that everyone in the world honestly thinks they're doing the right thing. Now, mind you, there are some times where you have bouts of anger or frustration where you shoot at someone, but more often than not, people don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to be an evil douchebag this morning. I'm going to go beat some people up, maybe kill a couple of orphans, maybe make a few new widows, typical Friday night stuff. Now, mind you, there's always the oddball or the crazy nitwit. Where, of course, their first thought when getting up in the morning is, how in the world do I make this world burn? Yeah, I do so love and enjoy those villains, and I find both very entertaining, but I honestly think heroes should share a similar thought process in terms of deciding whether or not to get involved in events. And so I really wanted to show a little bit of what I would feel a more legitimate struggle in between a person's head would be at this point in time. Especially an individual who is morally good. Mind you, there are some morally good people who would probably first instinct would to get rid of this. But, for the sake of Daean's character, I really wanted him to be the type of individual who was ignorant but not stupid. And like most people who don't always understand everything, they're usually pretty quick to try and make themselves at least sound or seem intelligent when it comes to certain things. So I figured he'd be the type of individual who'd take a little pride in getting something right. A pleaser, more or